All right, everybody, welcome back. My name is Jason Shadrick, and this is Chasing Frets, and we are wrapping up this week with Matt Smith. And as you heard earlier this week, I'm joined by Andy Ellis.
Hello.
And today's episode, we are going to focus on why you should be a recording guitarist. And I know you go way back with recording technology, Andy.
Yeah, I do. My first multi-track recorder was the beloved Portastudio 244, the 4-track on cassette, and that changed my life. I'd always lusted after big TAC reel-to-reel machines, could never afford it. Got the Portastudio, changed my life, and now I have a home studio that I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah.
And Matt will tell us why this is good for our music evolution, our personal, private music evolution, and why it's important that today you have one too.
Yeah, and for me, I was really late, embarrassingly late into getting into recording. But, even now, I'm able, even with my band, I'm able to, do overdubs and tracks and program stuff in my meager home studio. But probably more important to that, being able to record myself, whether it's playing over a backing track or just kind of putting something together for my own benefit. I've been able to have been able to analyze my own playing at a much higher level.
A sonic microscope, you're talking
exactly.
about.
And whether that comes to tones or techniques or even just rhythmic feel, it's putting something on and playing to it and then stepping back and listening to it objectively is one of the most valuable things that I've found about being able to record yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
So hope you enjoy our last episode here with Matt Smith, and we'll see you guys next week. All right, Matt, now I know down in Austin you run a studio called Six String Ranch, which I've come and hung out at and visited. And so what I wanted to talk to you today is about some simple home recording techniques that you've learned while running your studio that people, if they're just at home with a pretty simple setup, can use. So when you have somebody that comes and talks to you and says, "Hey, I'd like to get in to be able to make some basic home recordings," outside of, obviously, you're going to probably use a computer, an interface, a mic, something like that. What are like the bare bones building blocks you think people should start out with?
Well, the most important aspect of the software that's included with most recording systems is the compressor and the equalizer. And we'll talk first about the equalizer. First of all, the biggest mistake most people make is not high passing. Now, high passing is it sounds like you're taking stuff off the high, but you're actually taking stuff off the lows. In other words, there's a filter, and it looks like a little inverted V pointed down at the left. It's just a little slanted down towards the left. You'll see that on most equalizers as the filter is usually all the way over to the left. And then what that is a high-pass filter. And what that does is it takes out everything below a certain point. It's called a high-pass filter, but it takes out low end, just like a low-pass filter takes out high end. But the high-pass filter is the most important part because they're left by themselves. So even if I talk into this mic, there are frequencies like the wind hitting the mic that exist very, very low, below the range of the speakers. And if you don't take that out, it's going to rob the low end or mush up the low end of your recording. So usually what I'll do instantly is take off everything below 30 hertz off of every single channel, because there's no speakers that you have, even the ones in your car that rattle the windows, that are going to do anything below 30 hertz. So 30 hertz I generally take off of everything before I do anything. So that goes on first. The next thing I'll use a lot of times is a compressor. Now, software compressors almost invariably default to kind of a fast attack or a medium attack and a medium attack release, or medium release. Really, what happens if you try to turn the attack on your compressor all the way up and play your guitar, it's going to squash all the dynamics of what you have. So in other words, that's a terrible thing to do. Don't do that to your guitar. So what it is you want to use a relatively slow attack on a guitar and a compressor and a relatively fast release. Having said that, if I'm playing slide or something, I'll use a longer release time. Those are the two most important things with the compressor, the attack and the release controls. I would try the slowest attack and the fastest release, and then adjust it from there, depending upon how it sounds, after I've high-passed the guitar. Now, with an electric guitar, I'll usually high-pass it further than I would. I might take it all the way down to like all the high-pass all the way up to 50 hertz, so there's nothing that's going below 50 hertz on the guitar, because that's really, there's nothing on the electric guitar that's any worthless. It's just mud and noise down there and rumble. So I get rid of that, and then it tightens up the sound. Now, there's most compressors have different types. With guitar, I like the FET style compressor, and that's it just sounds more aggressive for guitar. That sounds pretty good. And then so that's the first thing. And then what I'll do, for example, on a bass, the secret weapon on the bass is to use a little boost at 700 hertz. And 700 hertz will just make it peak out in a mix. The same thing, for example, around 5K on the 5,000 hertz on the top of just a little bit on the top of a electric guitar, particularly a humbucker guitar. So the main thing is to listen to it. And if things sound bad, make them not sound bad. EQing is the things where you find the frequencies. A lot of equalizers have what they call an analyzer in it, so you can see exactly what's going on. You can see if there's too much 3K or too much, something like that, which is the kind of the ice pick to the head stuff. So those are the things that are really important. Also on vocals, that's the same thing. Particularly with guitar, though, you want to have a little bit of compression so that it packs it in, particularly with distorted guitars. Now, distorted guitars don't need compression that much because they're already compressed by the amplifier and the sound that you're using. A lot of times people in home recording will use software amplifiers because they live in an apartment and they can't, turn their amp up. But they make great software. There's plenty of different companies that make. I have my favorites, but we're not going to talk about those. But there's certain software. You just want it to sound good. If it sounds good, but you'll also notice that certain sounds don't sound good within the mix. Things sound great by themselves, but they don't necessarily sound good in the mix. And a lot of that has to do with how you're placing the equalization, And also, everything can't be huge. You want everything to be huge, but the more
if everything's huge, nothing's huge.
Yeah, that's what happens with recordings. Everyone tries to make this giant, huge stereo this, stereo that, and everything. I like to have things be small sometimes and fuzzy, because if there's something small and fuzzy, it sticks right out.
And one thing we were talking about before we started recording was the importance of an interface.
Yes. I'll explain it.
And so talk to me a little about that.
So a lot of times when people start recording, they buy the cheapest interface they can find. And I'll just use the analogy of this. When you go to a restaurant or something and you order a Coke or a drink or whatever, they have these little stirring straws in it. And the stirring straws generally have two tiny little holes in them. They're not meant to be sucked through, but all of us have tried sucking through the little drink stirring straw. And you have to suck really hard to get anything to come out of there. A poor quality interface is like the difference between drinking through that little tiny, tiny holes in the drink stirring straw or opening up your mouth and just pouring the drink in. So what happens is you have to look at it this way. What an interface is preamps and analog to digital converter and digital to analog converters. So what happens if this is what you pay for, and as you get up into a certain level of interface, you're paying for better preamps and you're paying for better conversion. Conversion is even more important than the preamps. It's what converts the audio, your beautiful guitar sound, into ones and zeros, and then converts the ones and zeros back into the guitar sound you want to hear. So having a good converters within your interface makes all the difference in the world. Even more important than the preamps. However, the preamps also have a really good, they also play an important part.
For a home studio, I mean, what kind of price point are you thinking is where interfaces start becoming sketchy? Like, do you feel like you need to spend 500 or more, or 1,000 or
Yeah,
more?
500 or more.
500.
I think you can get pretty ones. The one, like anything, as you get higher and higher level, you're paying a lot of money for just little increments of better, right?
Yeah.
So what happens with anything? You can get you can buy a guitar for $500, or you can buy a guitar for $5,000. Now, the $500 guitar, you'll be able to play pretty well. You can go do a gig with it, and it's going to sound good. The $5,000 guitar will be better, and it'll play better, it'll feel better, it'll sound better. But is it 10 times better? Realistically, yeah. So that's my point with the interface too. I would say at least a $500, and if you can find a good one, a $1,000 one used for $500, that's even better.
Yeah, right.
The great things about interfaces, either they work or they don't. They don't get old.
So we have the computer, the interface. When it comes to mics, what's a good starting place for people for mics?
There are several different types of mics. There's the condenser mic, which requires phantom power, and that's usually has multiple forms. For example, it can go from figure of 8 to cardioid to omni, and those are different mic patterns. Cardioid is just what is right in front of you. The next form of mic is a cardioid mic, which is like what you sing live through. I'm sorry, dynamic.
What's the condenser mic? What would that be good for?
Condenser mic is really good for vocals and for guitar and for acoustic guitars and for any number of things. It's just a much more pristine sound. Okay, so that really you kind of need a condenser mic. There are two types of condenser mics. There's a large diaphragm condenser mic, which is the larger ones that you see people singing into, and then there's the little pencil ones that are called small diaphragm mics. Those work exceptionally well for overhead mics for drums and for acoustic guitars. Mm-hmm. Then the next form of mic is the dynamic mic. The dynamic mic, for example, like a SM57 or what we're all talking through right now are dynamic mics. And those are really good for sometimes rock vocals and also for drums and also for guitar amps. The third type of mic that's really important is the ribbon mic. Now, if you've ever had problems with your electric guitar sounding too fizzy, ribbon mics will take care of that initially. Ribbon is just like this. It's the actual kind of metal, folded metal material. They call it ribbon. It's not really a ribbon. It's a piece of metal. But the ribbon mics, they don't use phantom power or do dynamics. You plug them in, but they're fairly low level, so you have to be able to drive them pretty loud with a preamp. You have to have a pretty powerful preamp. You need at least 60 decibels of gain for a ribbon mic. So you need to have a pretty good preamp to drive the ribbon mics. However, the ribbon mics sound great. They just sound great for electric guitars. If you have a ribbon mic on your electric guitars and you combine it, for example, even with a dynamic mic, you're going to have a great guitar sound. As long as your amp sounds good. It won't help a crappy guitar sound if your sound doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
There's an interesting controversy, if you read tape op, which I do and enjoy very much, enjoy it. But I'm old school, Matt. I'm older than you are.
Yeah,
and,
there's somebody older than me?
We grew up, yeah, believe it. But we grew up in a time where when you were in the studio, everything was mixed, of course, through big speakers in a room. But the destination was, there were one of two destinations that the consumer was expected to listen to the music in. Either your car or a room with a stereo system. Well, a stereo system. Hold on that thought because we're going to come back to the stereo system here in a second. But now people are consuming music through personal earbuds and, their phone or maybe a computer with the computer speakers. But basically, how many people, coming back to the stereo system, how many people do you know anymore who have a stereo set up in their living room? It ain't like it used to be. I know, me too, but we're the old guys. So the controversy is, it used to be against the law, metaphorically, to mix with headphones. It used to be against the law. You were supposed to mix through speakers because the stereo system. And now, of course, people are listening with earbuds, but I still hear this kind of resistance by a lot of mixers and engineers to the idea of mixing with headphones. Where do you stand on this, and why?
I think speakers are really, or studio monitors are really important, particularly to clearly hear bass, because the headphones don't necessarily always have, they can either overhype the bass or underhype the bass. I think but I really like a good set of headphones in order to hear the stereo separation better. So a lot of it has also to do with how your room is treated, but there's a larger thing here than just speakers or headphones, and that is how people consume music now. When we were growing up, people listened to albums. You'd put an album on the turntable, and a lot of people still do that, and they listen to the whole album. Mostly now, people listen to songs, and they listen to one song of that. The bottom line is, culturally, there's been a sea change in how society views art in general. Art has become much more disposable, and as such, has affected the entire music community because music has gone from being a sale commodity to being a press commodity. So really what we do is we make music to give relevance to ourselves as artists, but also as part of our body of work. As an artist, as a musician, you are represented by your body of work. And so it's really important to write and record music so that you have a body of work. It's the same thing. If you're a painter, you have to paint. If you're a writer, you have to write. If you're a musician, you also have to write and record in order to have this, have a body of work for your music. However, and this is the bitter truth, no one is ever going to care as much about your music as you do. And it's really important to kind of wrap your head around that, because we tend to obsess on every little piece of what we're doing. That one note, oh no, I got to fix it. I'm like, well, you can fix it, but no one really cares that much. And I totally respect, because really, for example, if you think about how we listen to music now, I mean, I listen to music all the time. I listen to it all day long. It's what I do for a living, and make music all day long for a living. But when I listen to music, I'm like, that's great. And then I move on. It doesn't change my world like it did when we were growing up, simply because and again, this is old guy talk, when we were growing up, there was much less media. There was a very limited amount of media, so that when things got into for example, you heard it on the radio, it had this giant machine behind it, and promotional machine, and then came the advent of FM radio, where DJs were allowed to play what they wanted to play. Now with internet radio, it's returned to that, so that's great. Now the playing field has been leveled. Obviously the major labels only are not signing a lot of rock bands, or they're mostly, they sign whatever they know they can sell. And so, but yet all of us who make music in our bedrooms can also find through avenues like Bandcamp and all these other places, can distribute our music digitally just like anyone. So the playing field at that point has been leveled, and that's great for the creation of music. I think more people are making music now than ever before, specifically since the pandemic. Since there's no gigs, we're all recording records. We're all making records. We're all in our bedrooms, using our creative energy towards making things because we can't go out and play.
Which circles back to, why do we need a home studio? Which is where we started this episode.
I'll say it again. As musicians, you are your body of work. Plus, the other thing is, when you're recording, you're able to really microscopically examine what you're doing. And that can be scary. Like, you're listening to your solos, you're like, why does that sound terrible? How's my vibrato? Why do I keep overbending? You may never hear that at a gig, and you may never hear that jamming with your friends. But when you record, all of a sudden you're forced to really come to terms with your technique and your ability, and above that, what you have to say.
I will say, one of the things I've learned the most as I've gotten into home recording, I've recorded some stuff and put it out there, with the band I'm in, but simply just recording yourself practicing has been one of the most beneficial things to for me as to getting my recording chops together is being able to kind of objectively step back and listen to how I sound, and am I in front of the beat, am I behind the beat, am I on the beat, all that kind of stuff that you can't really accurately analyze in the moment.
It makes you a better musician.
Yeah.
There's no question about it, because you're forced to analyze yourself. You're forced to, and then it's I've always taught my students to record themselves, because for the same reason. Even if you're just practicing at home, you with a metronome, you record yourself for that same reason. The worst thing you can do is be ahead of the beat. You could laying back a little bit always makes things sound a little greasier. So you're behind the beat. I'll show you. For example, if I'm doing this, now that's on the beat. This is ahead of the beat. Here's behind the beat. On the beat. Ahead of the beat. Behind the beat. Now, which one makes you feel better?
I vote New Orleans.
It was New Orleans, and then it was Minneapolis, right?
Kind of, I guess so. But no, that was on the beat. Was Minneapolis? So you're
on the beat's Minneapolis. Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about Prince and the time and stuff like that.
But then again, you listen to like East Bay Tower of Power. There is no 16th note is left behind.
No,
everyone is accounted for.
Yeah,
and Rocco is the accountant.
Yeah.
but the whole thing with that stuff too is that it sounds so great, because when Rocco's playing those 16th note beats, everybody else is laying way back, and he's
good point.
So that comes back to arrangement again. So you're talking about, why do things sound good? If everyone was playing really like Rocco was and playing 16th notes, it wouldn't be anywhere near as funky.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, I got to tell you, it's been such a treat to hang out with you, old buddy, and spend this time nerding out on this stuff. Thanks again for taking the time to hang with us.
Oh, my pleasure.